I want to start by really congratulating the organizers of this meeting for even changing the headline and the thrust of the meeting to Syria and Iran. This is the Iran Working Group of Veterans for Peace. But it's so important at this time when weapons are just surging in from the U.S., but via Qatar, via Saudi Arabia, where there's special forces in Jordan, where there's NATO troops in Turkey, where just weeks ago Israel bombing of Syria. So linking these two issues together, because it's Syria that's a dagger at Iran right now. And just to also say that the U.S. today is involved in proxy wars while preaching democracy. Democracy while using the most corrupt feudal monarchies in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Morocco, every one of the monarchies, and yet they talk democracy. They preach constantly peace while using aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines and jet aircrafts and drones. They preach self-determination while invading and occupying and no-fly zones from Iraq to Afghanistan to Libya. They preach human rights and are unable to shut down Guantanamo and 1,000 secret U.S. bases, and the largest prison population in the world is right here. And it's so important at every one of these events that there be unity on a grassroots level, that the people's movement here again and again puts forth the call for hands off and declares that we need jobs and health care and education and not endless wars.
The threats against Iran and the threats against the Iranian people, I did some research preparing, and it is scary to look at and to see how it's like there's a gun pointed at the head of the Iranian people with a bullet in the chamber, the safety off, and a finger on the trigger. And that is the U.S. deployments in the Persian Gulf and the surrounding areas. Everything kind of circles around the U.S. Navy, the Fifth Fleet, which is based in that bastion of democracy, Bahrain, and all the ships that are part of the fleet. And just to give you an example of the ships that are sailing this very moment off the coast of Iran in the Persian Gulf, which is a relatively narrow body of water. You have the USS George Washington, nuclear-powered aircraft carrier with a crew of 5,500 sailors, with about 10 different air squadrons of various kinds of planes, F-14 fighters, F-18 fighters. There's even a Marine Corps squadron based on this aircraft carrier. And, you know, this isn't one of those cruise ships you see docked on the Hudson River where, okay, you're in the Persian Gulf, the weather's nice, the water's beautiful, and folks are on deck and, you know, putting on sunscreen, listening to music or whatever. These ships, the USS George, is at battle stations almost probably 24/7. Once it gets into the Gulf, once it goes through the Straits of Hormuz, it is battle stations. And that ship doesn't travel alone, because that ship travels with another aircraft carrier. And that other aircraft carrier is the USS Independence, also with over 5,500 sailors. 5,500, that's a huge crew. Just think how much it costs to feed, the fuel, everything that goes into keeping that ship moving around. And look at the way our streets are. Look at the hospitals, the layoffs in schools. And it all fits together. But those two ships don't travel alone. They travel with cruisers like the USS Bunker Hill, Tomahawk missile capable, over 400 crew members. and the USS Normandy. They accompany that aircraft carrier. Then there are 6 destroyers, each with crews of about 300 to 350 sailors. And I'm naming them to sort of demystify this. You know, these are ships, these are like death machines. And at every moment of the day, they're right off the coast of Iran. And, you know, the Iranian people have issues just like we have in their society that they want to deal with, whether it's the environment, whether it's hospitals, whether it's they want better food, they want organic food, they want pure food, all the things that we do. Even the LGBT question, there are people in Iran who are trying to figure out how to deal with it, but they cannot deal with it as they should, because this gun is pointed at their head every second of the day. There are also guided missile frigates. Oh, I left those out. The USS Reuben James, the Samuel B. Roberts, and the Ingersoll. They all have ships companies of, 400. Then there are the attack submarines. The USS Annapolis and the USS Charlotte. They never come up. They're underwater carrying cruise missiles and nuclear missiles. And this is the gun pointed at the Iranian people. And then there's the USS Guam. Anybody ever heard of that ship? Or it occasionally docks here in New York. That's an amphibious assault ship that has a crew of 900 plus 2,000 combat-ready Marines. What are they there for? And just think how much it costs to keep this whole fleet there. And then there are other ships. There's amphibious transports, there's dock landing ships, and that's just the Navy. Then there's the Air Force, which has within close proximity to Iran over 8,000 personnel, most based either at Jabir Air Base in Kuwait, in Sirlik Air Base in Turkey, Sheikh Issa Airfield in Bahrain, or the biggest one, which has over 100 aircraft, Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. And lastly, there's the U.S. Army, which still has over 7,000 combat ground troops in Camp Doha in Kuwait. These all, and how far is Camp Doha from the Iranian border? It's probably less than 100 miles from the oil-producing areas of Iran. So this is what Iran faces every day, 24/7. The propaganda that comes out is amazing. I went onto the website of the Fifth Fleet. It is written also as propaganda for the crews on these ships, who are limited as to what they could read on the internet. But you can be sure one of the things they could read on the internet is the website of the Fifth Fleet. VBSS mission. Now, what is a VBSS mission? That is a visit, board, search, and seizure mission. And there was a mission that came off a guided missile cruiser, the USS Monterey. And it made contact with the Dow. And a Dow is a very traditionally designed boat that plies the Persian Gulf waters. You'll find it even in the Indian Ocean. I think it has 1 or 2 masts. And this being the 21st century, will also have an auxiliary engine. But they're used by fisher people. And that's the main fishing boat in the area. So this article writes about this Dow being boarded, and the person in charge of the mission, an ensign, he says, "We had no suspicions that anything out of the ordinary was occurring on the vessel. We were simply conducting our mission of building positive relationships." Now, can you imagine You're coming up now, it's not the cruiser, it's one of those super huge inflatable boats, probably with 15 crew people on, armed to the teeth, looking like Rambos, And he says, we were simply conducting our mission of building positive relationships with local fishermen. We want to make sure they understand we are here to help and that we are available if they need assistance. Now, imagine you're a fisher person on a dhow and you see this boat come. And then they say, after making initial contact, what's the contact? Hey, we're here, right? And sharing information, over one of those portable loudspeakers. The master of the dhow, which is the captain, invited the team to board his vessel. I mean, can you... And this is right off the coast of Iran. It doesn't identify, the nationality of the boat, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Members of the Monterey's VBSS team moved on board the dhow and continued their conversation and exchange of information. According to Ensign Cesar Ramos, the team leader, the VBSS team had a positive meeting with the crew and even enjoyed some tea together. We exchanged small gifts and made a great first step in developing a good relationship and reputation with the local fishing community. Now, give me a break. This is what is going on right now in the Persian Gulf, off the coast of Iran. And it's very close to a shooting situation when you read things like this and you see the types of ships that are there, and 24/7 battle stations, fingers on the trigger, everybody tense, everybody nervous. We have to put a stop to that.
It is a unique opportunity for us here, and a great step forward, in my view, for the peace movement to have some of the major peace organizations in this country to come together, actually, and endorse a program like this. It's not just a Veterans for Peace, it's also an effort, joint effort by United for Peace and Justice and also U.S. Peace Council. So in that sense, it's for important organizations at this event are present. So I think it's a very important event, and we thank Sara and IAC for really facilitating this for us. The U.S. is playing with fire in the Middle East, and we're dealing with a situation that is very serious and critical in the region, and it calls for serious action, urgent action, coordinated action on the part of the peace movement in the United States especially. What I want to do is to raise this issue of the need for urgent action on the part of the peace movement in the United States to deal with the issue. The silence that we are having, I wouldn't say complete silence, but making declarations, issuing statements, condemnations will not do. We need to be able to mobilize the masses of people. And that requires a certain steps on our part as the peace movement. And looking at the weaknesses that we have, try to overcome it as soon as possible, in the fastest way possible, so that we can have some impact and some role in preventing another disaster that's emerging in the Middle East. The peace movement, both in the United States and at the global level, is very much fragmented. From the organizational point of view, we have been lacking a coordinated leadership that is capable of producing timely and effective response nationally and globally. This means that we need to come together. We need a partnership. We need a unity within the peace movement. And that has not been addressed so far. We need to do it. We are involved in a struggle that is a long-term struggle. It's not going to come to a result quickly. and we have to be prepared for it. And this is not the last step these people are going to be taking. Syria, Iran, and possibly the next one is going to be Pakistan, according to the general plans they have. Different parts of the movement have been defining their priorities separately. I don't mean independently, I mean separately. And are mostly acting as a single issue movements without recognizing the organic links that exist between various issues they are fighting for. One is fighting for wages and workers' rights, the other is fighting for immigrant rights, the third is working for environmental issues, the fourth for peace, the fifth for civil rights, and so on and so forth. So when pro-immigrant rights movement organizes a protest, there's no sign of the environmentalists. When the environmentalists organize something, there's no sign of the civil rights movement or workers' labor movement. So this is causing a serious weakness in our movement. So when it is clear that such a single issue oriented approach at the expense of a systemic approach that sees the linkage between all of these elements will not get us anywhere, and it has not gotten us anywhere so far. Almost all of us are in one way or another victim of government propaganda and corporate media. It is the government and the corporate media that define for us, not necessarily for the peace movement or the activists, but for the broad masses of the country, of the people, who is a terrorist, who is a dictator, thank you, who is a number one enemy of the United States, and who needs to be attacked quickly. The demonization tactics of the government and the media has pacified the great majority of people, as we see in the case of Syria right now, with the demonization of Assad, as it is going on. We saw it with Ahmadinejad, we saw it with Chavez, we saw it with lots of people, right? And probably they are doing it to newly elected president of Venezuela right now, right? So, neither all of these leaders are equally demons, nor all of them are freedom-loving leaders or people. But this is besides the point. They are demonizing not because the US and other imperialist powers are concerned about democracy and human rights. They are demonizing these people because they are each, for their own reasons, standing against imperialist plans or simply are an obstacle to their imperialist plans or global plans for the world. Right now, this demonization has been so effective that it has paralyzed the movement in the face of the blatant imperialist intervention in Syria. Probably a similar plan is underway right now in Venezuela, as I mentioned, to discredit the leadership of that country. It's a lack of understanding of nature of imperialism. There is a general tendency in the movement to look at these crimes and atrocities as a consequence of either bad policy, incompetent leadership, or something else. That is why we tend to blame the likes of Bush and Cheney for the invasion of Iraq, or Obama for NATO attack on Libya and expansion of drone attacks on Pakistan, Yemen, and other countries. This is totally misguided approach because it ties its hopes and efforts to changing the policy or leadership rather than, and mostly, through electoral process. This path has been tried over and over again for decades without any results. The fact of the matter is that imperialism is neither a result of wrong policy nor of bad leadership. Imperialism is the very essence of the present system of global capitalism itself, and until the movement comes to grips with this undeniable fact, it will not be able to stop it. Understanding this is the key to understanding the link between all the issues that the movement is fighting for or against, and to developing an effective strategy for success. Preventing another catastrophic eruption of American militarism depends upon the mass mobilization of the peace movement against the root causes of war and injustice throughout the world. And that is the imperialist agenda for the 21st century world. Let us substitute imperialism policy of preemptive military strike with a peace movement's policy of preemptive peace strike. Let us respond not just to wars and invasions after they happen, but to even the smallest preparations that are being made for wars and interventions before they happen. And that requires a coordinated effort on the part of the whole peace movement to predict, analyze and predict what is coming next and be able to move before the imperialist forces move. And that is something I would like to bring to this meeting as a point for discussion to see in what ways we can really bring together the peace movement and create a united front against imperialism and war.
You know, talking about how can we change the trajectory of U.S. foreign policy or of American imperialism, we have to think, I think, about what kind of narrative can we bring forward to people that they can understand. And, you know, earlier when Michael Kramer was talking about all the forces arrayed against Iran, you know, depending on the audience, some audiences would just be ecstatic, like, wow, look at all that stuff. It's just great that we have all this power that we can bring to bear against against our enemy, right? So one of the things, you know, when Faraz talks about the peace movement being proactive, we have to reach outside our own circles. You know, like this room, there's a lot of things I can say, and you'll agree, or we might have small disagreements, and we'll talk about them. But when we move outside of this room, we have to have a strategy and a narrative and a discussion that's going to bring people along, meet them where they are, and help them move to a new place. So some of my experiences, you know, being able to share my feelings about the country and what I think, you know, helps me understand how I might be able to talk to people to help bring them along. And if you can help them understand about, first of all, how many people even know the real history of why Iranians don't trust the United States? Do they know that we were part of a coup that that basically moved out an elected government? Do you know how many people know that they had an elected government? You know, these are the types of things that, you know, if you are able to bring to someone and then talk about our own history, you know, and people might say, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. You know, so that's one thing I think is important that I wanted to bring to this discussion. The thing also is that while I think most people in the country are I don't know if they're anti-war, everybody's for peace, you know, everybody's for peace, everybody says they're for peace, right? But obviously it means different things to different people. I think most people at this point do not want to see the U.S. get involved in another war for various reasons. We have very specific reasons. Other people are just tired of war. A lot of people, it will just cost too much. I mean, everybody's got different reasons. But that anti-war sentiment does not necessarily translate into examining U.S. foreign policy. It doesn't necessarily translate into trying to understand what are the reasons we're at war, or understanding American imperialism and things like that. And we have to really, once again, when we think about how we talk to people and what we talk about, we have to think about how can we move people from that sentiment of anti-war wherever they are. And some people, that their anti-war sentiment is not going to line up with anything that we're going to be talking about, because they really, you know, they're really on the other side of the fence. But there are a number of people who are really on our side. We have to figure out ways to communicate with them and help them begin to analyze and think about the foreign policy and how that's connected to how much money we spend and what we're doing in the world. Because a lot of people really don't make that connection. And when you think about it, just think about how when our foreign policy and our domestic policy are talked about in the news and in popular culture in general, they're intentionally disconnected. They are not talked about together, never. So I think people have been brainwashed to not think about them, that they're actually connected together. You know, so that's another thing. We have to help people make those connections to get over the dialogue that we generally have about U.S. foreign policy and domestic policy, so they can see that they really are connected. Another thing that I think is important is this idea of American exceptionalism. And I'm bringing these things up because, once again, going with Faraz talking about us being, as the peace movement, being more proactive, we have to deal with certain ideas that are alive within our society. Because right now, and I'll go back to American exceptionalism, but the peace movement, one of the weaknesses is that we're small, you know. And going back to what Faraz was saying earlier about all the different movements and what many of us call silos, a lot of those silos are good size, but the people are focused on whatever their issue is in their silo. You know, so people are focused on, like you said, immigrants' rights, environmentalism, civil rights, or voters' rights, etc. And people are real focused on those things. Jobs, trying to make the ends meet, you know, pay their rent, put food on the table. I can't be mad at somebody because they are trying to deal with those issues. Those are real issues. And not thinking about something that's happening 1,000 miles away. So, once again, I say that because we have to figure out ways to deal with certain ideas that are going on within our culture. And one of them is American exceptionalism. And what I believe American exceptionalism allows to happen is that it gives cover to a lot of actions that are taking place in the world because people just take it as gospel, so to speak, or a belief that it's okay for the U.S. to do these things. And then they really don't have to think about, you know, what responsibility we have as individuals for what the U.S. is doing in the world. And real quick, not to go in, because you can do a long dissertation on American exceptionalism, but the things that allow for this are, first of all, the ideals that we profess to believe in. You know, democracy, human rights, the sanctity of the individual and those things. That's like the base. And people believe we actually have a mission in the world to spread these things. I mean, even us here in this room, we might not feel like we have a mission to spread these things, but we believe these things are important. We believe that democracy is important, that freedom is important. I mean, it's part of the thing. It's part of the things that we struggle for in our nation. And one of the reasons that we try to stop American imperialism is because we believe people should have self-determination. So you see how these things can be conflated easily into people thinking, well, these things are important, so why shouldn't everybody else have them? So there's this sense of mission that people believe the U.S. has. And this sense of mission, there's this destiny that the U.S. is supposed to spread this. And that destiny is two-sided. That destiny is one from people who are believers, believe it's a God-given destiny. You know, God has given the United States the right to lead the world, and we're the indispensable nation and all that crazy stuff, right? But then on the non-believers, or people who that might not be where they're coming from, there's the humanitarian side, or it's humanity's destiny to be free. So it's not a left thing, it's not a right thing, it's not a Christian far right thing. It's U.S. It's like this undercurrent within U.S. culture. And because it is human destiny, and because it is a God-given mission, everything we do is virtuous in pursuit of this foreign policy. So I'm just saying these things to you because I believe these are very important things to understand that's taking place in the psyche of our nation. Because if we're going to address changing how we act in the world, I believe we have to address these things. And I want to say, though, that I call it the identity myth. Every nation, every people has some kind of myth about their identity. So I don't think that the answer is to necessarily try to get rid of the identity myth, because I think it's a human thing to have an identity myth. I think the answer is to change it, to make it more congruent with the things we say we believe in. And it also gives us material to use, because we do have these ideals about freedom, but look what we're doing in the world. They don't match up. So the other thing, real quick, to say is that it'd be great if we could have more forums similar to this, but once again, the forums have to reach outside our group. They have to be larger. When I say larger, not necessarily in number, but in terms of the diversity of it. And in fact, it might be good to have discussions where you're having some kind of debate, where you're bringing together people who think our foreign policy is right when it comes to Iran and us. And then we can have a discussion that causes some uproar, or something, and then it gets in the news. So because that's what we need. We need to have, one of the things I read of the biography of Dr. King is, I forgot the exact term, but basically it's the surface tensions. That's what's the term. Surface tensions. And one of the reasons to go into communities and cause the disruption in the community is because it makes the people in the community have to talk about what's going on. Whereas before, when the tensions weren't surfaced, everybody's running around, and the only place they talk about it is in their homes, and everybody's in agreement in their home pretty much on certain things. But when you get different parts of the community actually having to deal with each other and talk about these things, then new ideas and new ways of thinking can actually evolve from that discussion. And I really think that's important, that we, as the peace movement, should make happen. And I guess the last thing, let me make sure. I guess there's two other things. Another reason, just real quick, that yesterday Faraz talked about a lot of different reasons that the U.S. is doing what it's doing with Iran and Syria. But one of the things I would just like to remind people about imperialism, be it U.S. imperialism or just imperialist powers, is that if you do something, like Iran did in terms of kicking us out of their country, that's never forgotten by an imperialist power. Imperialist powers don't forget when you cross them or you defeat them or whatever. They're always looking to come back and remind everybody else that you can't do this to us. Because if you do this to us, we're going to crush you, and you won't try to do it to us in the future. That's one of the ways imperialist powers work. So that's very much alive in this situation with Iran, just payback. So I think that's a real important point to remember. And then also the thing with Iran, how the crisis ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's in the news and there's a bunch of saber rattling, and we get up in arms and we're trying to do something, and then other times it recedes. But we know, and I hope everyone here does, and I'm sure you do, that it's the politics, though, hasn't really changed. And until that changes, and I think we have to change it as the peace movement, because I don't think many of the other groups, the other struggles as you talk about, really don't necessarily see how it's in their interest to change the dynamic. We know it is in the interest of all of us to change it. So we have this responsibility because we can see it. And until that politics changes, specifically Iran, Israel, and the United States, then this is going to continue to come back. This crisis is going to continue to come back until there's either war of some sort, or somehow we change, and I say we, change U.S. foreign policy or the trajectory of their foreign policy when it comes to Iran.
I so much agree that the U.S., by the way, never forgets. And when you look at Haiti, 200 years later, they never forgave African slaves who freed themselves, and still making Haiti pay the price. But it does show also that the struggle is so much remembering and resistance, because it's also what fuels the struggle still in Haiti. Or you could look at the struggle in Palestine and in Iran, and right here, that people who have fought and won things will try desperately to hold on.